we are an unhealthy population in Mississippi. So we've got ground to make up there, and I consider that part of the economic puzzle.
This week on Mississippi Insight, the new Speaker of the House says health care will be his top priority in the 2024 session and the years to come. We'll hear from the Holmes County Republican Jason Wright this hour. And
well, Byron, your question leads me to believe that you might have some insight into my calendar and some of the meetings I have. We'll talk about that later.
Jackson Mayor Chokwe and Lumumba on the prospects for garbage service, the fight against crime, and the importance of getting more big events into the capital city. That's all ahead this Sunday on Mississippi Insight. I'm Byron Brown. Thank you for joining us for this February 4th edition of Mississippi Insight. In his first month in the House Speaker's chair, Jason Wright has already helped shepherd some big development projects worth billions of dollars and thousands of jobs in the Magnolia State. But it's still early in the legislative session, and this Republican leader makes it clear he expected representatives to do a lot of work on health care policy in the months to come. He told our senior political correspondent Richard Lake recently that Mississippi's health care and its economic prospects go hand in hand. Here's a key excerpt from their interview last week.
One in Marshall County was an EV battery manufacturer that was a consortium of 3 of the largest truck manufacturers in the world. So cutting edge technology in an emerging sector and markets, maybe indicating that we are here, for the long haul in that space of auto of the future. While at the same time, this deal last week in Madison County with Amazon Web Services and the huge data centers and computers that'll be a part of that, and all the technology surrounding the fiber and all of that positions us very well now and for the future, and in that we can be a major player in the Southeast. In the tech space, which seems to be where everything is going, providing good paying jobs that people actually want. Now, this idea of whole of government approach to economic development, that's, the way I look at that is, coming from a conservative background in my politics, for me, less government is more. So I've got to be careful that we do want to create an environment here that is inviting for business, less regulation, freedom for folks to work, low taxation, good quality of life. I think all of those things are available right here in Mississippi. And you hear people say it all the time, but it's true. If you can just get them to come here and look, folks end up staying here. Now, I think we've still got some work to do in the healthcare arena, statewide. And so that's going to be our focus this coming year and throughout this 4-year session is hopefully, finally, solving that piece of the puzzle. Because, if you're going to have a robust workforce and you're going to, have jobs and you're going to have these emerging markets in our state, folks don't want to come to a healthcare desert. And so we want to be sure our providers are plenty and folks have access to care, and that we've been dinged a lot, and our ratings, especially compared to other states and even our sister states, we are an unhealthy population in Mississippi. So we've got ground to make up there, and I consider that part of the economic puzzle, the fact that we need to not only have this educated workforce, we need a healthy workforce. And so that's going to be the focus for us over the next few years, while sure maintaining investments in economic development sites throughout the state and making sure site readiness and speed to market, that we are a player there. And speaking to healthcare being a piece of that economic puzzle that we talk about as a whole of government approach, we want a healthy workforce. And so for us, we live in an ACA world when it comes to the Affordable Care Act was passed. It's been the law of the land, been with us now for 10 years. We have not expanded Medicaid in the traditional sense as 40 other states have done. So I want us to look at ways to get that population some health insurance. We're talking about working Mississippians who provide they contribute a valuable service to our state's economy. Not only in taxes paid, but in the fact that you know, you've heard a lot of talk recently about our low labor participation rates hovering somewhere around 50%. Well, those people are helping make up that 50%. I want to do everything I can to keep them healthy, out of an emergency room without health insurance, and in the workforce. And to do that, I think we have to find them some basic form of coverage. Now, we never developed a state exchange through our Department of Insurance. We only have a federal exchange in Mississippi. We are looking at ways that we can actually enact and develop a state exchange, and those products that the Affordable Care Act did allow for through a state exchange, and the premiums and the copays that are available. We intend for that to be a part of this equation, but we also intend for Medicaid on some level to be part of the equation to cover what we are calling the low-income workers of this state. Finding a way for them to be covered, either through the exchanges or through Medicaid. I do anticipate there will be a work requirement attached to that, which will require a waiver from CMS, so we'll have to work hard to figure out exactly what that looks like. Mississippi businesses have indicated a willingness to help lead the charge on this front, as well as our healthcare providers. They want to be part of the solution here too. So we're spending a bunch of our time bringing all those people in around the table, smart people who actually do fully understand all the ins and outs of Medicaid, which is incredibly complex, and all aspects of healthcare now, especially from the financial side. My drive is not to find able-bodied adults who aren't in the workforce and provide them free healthcare. But for those in Mississippi who are trying, who are working, who are engaged, they simply don't make enough money to pay for their own health care, or their employer doesn't provide it because of the cost related to it, the expense related to it. Those are the people that I'm most interested in covering. I think it even provides an incentive for folks to get involved in the workforce while low wages may be part of their beginning steps, to getting back into the workforce or getting into the workforce for the first time. Healthcare is an incentive in and of itself. It's obvious. It's folks are passionate about it. They want it. We all think that folks need some basic level of healthcare, because what happens if they don't have it is they neglect their healthcare, and by the time a condition has advanced to the point where they do seek care, it's usually in an emergency room without insurance. The costs are incredibly high. They have no insurance. The provider ends up in an uncompensated care situation, and that cycle just seems to keep reoccurring and reoccurring. We would like to break that cycle and get folks some basic level, especially our working folks. And if we just expand it to everybody, the fear is it would be a runaway program from the standpoint of it may be as many as 200,000, 300,000, 400,000 Mississippians, and I can tell you we can't pay for that. Even at a 10% match, it could potentially be a budget buster for us. And I don't know if it's a good. I would also say it's not a good thing. Now you're talking about if the number went that high, you're talking about almost half of our population on some form of Medicaid. So I think the strides we're making in the economic sector, jobs being created, I feel like we've got a little momentum in economic activity in our state with capital investment and things that are going on. I don't want to do anything that's going to hamper that. So I want to be real careful and take a surgical approach about how we do it, through the exchanges, through a waiver requirement through CMS.
Monitor 12 News for full coverage of legislative developments as they occur. After the break, Chokwe and Lumumba and the City with Soul on Mississippi Insight. There's always a lot to talk about when the mayor of Jackson comes into our studio, Chokwe and Lumumba is now in his 7th year in the mayor's office. He's been through a lot, and so has the capital city. We spoke with the mayor last Tuesday as he and the city council look ahead to a new garbage collector for Jackson. Mayor, thank you for joining us.
Absolutely, my pleasure.
The city's emergency contract with Richards Disposal expires at the end of March. The request for proposal has been posted for a permanent trash pickup service. What's the status, and what's the status of the search for now a vendor at this point?
Well, everything with the RFP, the request for a proposal, is still on track. It has to go through a review committee where they review all of the requests and they score them. After that takes place, they make a recommendation to the administration. I have yet to receive those recommendations. Once I do, then I will then put it before the city council. I do want to be clear that we've done everything that we could to avoid getting to this point. I shared that the concern with a new RFP was the fact that we have a lawsuit pending over the city's head. And if that claimant prevails, if Richards prevails in their lawsuit, then the residents of Jackson could potentially be saddled with 2 garbage contracts, which means that their garbage rates will increase exponentially. And so that is why we put certain safeguards within the RFP to ensure that our residents weren't having to deal with the weight of 2 garbage contracts at the same time. So prayerfully, we're able to put something before the council, and prayerfully we can put this behind us. Prior to coming to the RFP, we put forth a negotiation with the council that would have allowed the council to have more say in the process, that would have allowed the lowest possible price that we could have at this time for the residents, and lastly would have allowed for Richards to dismiss their lawsuit. Unfortunately, in the final hour, they decided not to go with that agreement. And so, be that as it may, this is where we are, and prayerfully we're able to get agreement and move forward.
How confident are you that you and the council can work some things out so that we won't be in the situation we were in before, where residents will go without garbage for a couple of weeks?
Yeah, well, I'd love to have the crystal ball to say everything that's going to happen. What I can share is that we had a conversation as recently today so that everybody understands the stakes, everybody understands the urgency of the moment. And so I'm going to always leave opportunity for negotiations. I won't speak pessimistically about that process because I think that doesn't lend itself for cooler heads to prevail and the right decisions to be made. What I will say is that my priority today is the priority that I've always had from day one. That is keeping the residents in mind, keeping the cost factor in mind. The reason that the cost factor is so critical is because, just as we've said, you're not only looking at trash rates, which have increased because the industry across the nation has increased its rates, but you're also looking at the increase of water rates to maintain things like our wastewater system. Just as we said many months ago that we were going to look at an increase there, now we've had the third-party manager come before the council and suggest that he is about to increase those rates. And so all of this is a burden that the resident will have to endure. They're going to have to endure on the same bill, increased water rates and increased trash rate. And we want to make sure that we're making affordability our primary focus. It's
been over a year since the third-party administrator has taken over Jackson's water. How satisfied are you with how Jackson Water is handling the water system in the city?
Well, I'll say that there's no bigger cheerleader for Jackson Water than myself and our administration, because we need for them to be successful. We need for our residents no longer to endure the challenges of water insecurity. I believe no matter who is in charge, that the people's interests and the people's concerns have to be heard, and they have to be front and center. No matter your expertise, it is the people of Jackson who have suffered at water insecurity for 30 years plus. And so we need to make sure that we build a resilient, dependable, and equitable water system. And the residents of Jackson need to be a part of that equation.
We just had the Arctic blast that came through here. How satisfied are you with how Ted Hennepin and his team handled the response to the Arctic blast?
Well, I'm not on the ground, so I won't give a report card. But what I will say is that we've been here before, right? We've seen bad weather. We've seen the effects that weather has on our fragile system. And I think that we have to continue to speak early and often and be honest with our residents. We can claim no easy victories and tell no lies. We have to make sure that we're clear and honest with people so that they understand that, yes, we have the blessing of resources to repair our system, but it will take time, that we didn't get here overnight, and we certainly won't repair it overnight. And I think our residents are reasonable. Our residents don't have unreasonable expectations, but they do expect that we communicate clearly and honestly with them.
When it comes to Jackson crime, the city is starting out pretty tough in the first month of the year with a dozen murders so far. How do you rate the chief, and how satisfied with you are with the chief's handling of the crime crisis right now?
Well, I'm very pleased with our chief. I see him working hard every day. We meet every week to discuss not only the numbers, strategies, what we're informing our residents about, and what we've seen overwhelmingly is interpersonal crimes. Interpersonal crimes that it is almost impossible for any police department to be on hand when, a son kills his mother, right? Or when we see these disputes that often take place between people who know each other and have conflicts that have been festering for some time. And so what I see in the police chief is a police department that has been able to increase its numbers substantially within a very short period of time. I see a police department that in all of the murders that have happened recently, they've been very swift to not only respond, but to apprehend a suspect. And they are well above the national average in crime solvability rate. And so what that tells me is that the police are doing their job. It also tells me that when you have a police department which the primary part of their responsibility is to respond after an incident takes place, that they're doing their work. We just have to put more tools in the toolbox. And so we're happy that we now have launched our Office of Violence Prevention and Trauma Recovery. Along with the chief, they meet with me every week so that we can talk about not only what the policing strategy will be, but what our violence interruption and interference strategy will be. When a family deals with a traumatic event, how are we responding to them so that we not only help them with the stress and the struggle of the circumstance of their family member being hurt or killed, but how are we reducing the likelihood of retaliation to take place within our community? That's just one element of what we have to do in order to reduce crime.
And the relationship between Capitol Police and JPD, what's your feelings on having Capitol Police involved with patrolling Jackson?
Yeah. Well, I'm on the record for ensuring that we have equity in our judicial system and making sure that we don't have, disparities across the city in terms of where our residents are protected. But beyond that, where they already have jurisdiction, I can share with you that the police chief, Chief Wade, talks frequently and communicates with me and the administration about those discussions. So they work hand in hand on many operations together. But going forward, we need to make sure that our vision of public safety is incorporative of or it incorporates, let me say this, incorporates what Jackson residents feel is in their best interest. Yeah,
you opposed the creation of a new court system in the city. Now we're beginning the new year. Have you changed your views on that at all, or where do you stand on that situation?
I think that residents need to be able to have an elected process of selecting who will overhear cases that are ultimately consequential to their family members, their community, and I think any suggestion or any option that does not include that is problematic.
We're in a new legislative session. What are you hoping the legislature, what might come out of the legislature that would help Jackson?
Well, we had the opportunity to speak to our delegation and give them our priorities. I expect and am grateful that they will be lifting up those priorities across the city. There are many. They deal with infrastructure and public safety, the things that our residents complain about on a consistent basis or advise us about on a consistent basis. And so we're going to work hand in hand with them to ensure that we're present when we need to be present, that we do other things in the background that helps our cause and helps the things that Jackson needs in order to thrive and survive.
Let's talk about the community events. You have a lot of community events coming into Jackson-Dixon National Rodeo. You got St. Patty's Day Parade coming in. Talk about the events that are coming in the months ahead and what Jackson has done to recover since the lifting of COVID.
Well, Byron, your question leads me to believe that you might have some insight into my calendar and some of the meetings I have. We'll talk about that later. But in terms of the historic events or the events that we have every year that we've come to expect, where we think that it helps provide a sense of place to our city. It's a part of our culture. We know that we have residents and people who come near and far for the Dixie National Rodeo. We always want to be a good host to them, make sure that our residents and our visitors enjoy. But we know that we have a robust St. Patrick's Day parade. I joke that I'm unaware of a substantial Irish population in the city of Jackson, but we all come together and have a good time, and you know, it's not only enjoyable for our residents, but it's enjoyable to the people who visit. Lastly, what I will say is that you should stay tuned because it's quite possible that we can be adding another event to the slate of things that we offer that could potentially be as big or bigger than what we've seen in recent memory.
That'll be this year, or is that the years to come?
It will potentially start this year, but it will be an event here to stay.
All right, Mayor, well, with that, we'll leave it at that.
Thank you. I appreciate you.
And thank you for joining us.
All right, thank you.
And we'll be right back. If you have comments or questions about today's show or a suggestion for an interview or segment, just drop us a line. Email our producers. The address is news@WJTV.com. Big thanks to Mayor Chokwe, Lumumba, and House Speaker Jason White for joining us this week. We'll be back next weekend with more of the political and current affairs coverage that you demand. I'm Byron Brown from all of us here at 12 News. Make it a great weekend.